Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog. This week I think I've caught up on my reading plans, although I did need to shuffle things around a bit because of the library. Basically, next 2 weeks I need to finish both the audiobook for Northern Lights by Philip Pullman and A Memory of Light by Brandon Sanderson, Robert Jordan. That's a lot of hours of audiobook given how much I've been listening to audiobooks lately, but we're going to try. I'm starting with Northern Lights just because it's due back first. I do also have a physical book this week, so I'm going to be reading Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. Let me tell you about this one first because I did read 50 pages of it last night. So this is like a historical fiction kind of set in wartime, except we're following this young girl who is able to basically live her life over and over again. So like there's kind of a prologue, but then in the first chapter she's born and she dies in childbirth, and then we experience the childbirth again where she survives, and it's kind of like so far she's only really gotten up to 4 years old, but she's already died multiple times, and every time we get the scene told once as she dies and then told again where events are slightly different, like timings are slightly different, which means she doesn't die. So like in the first one, because of when it snowed, kind of depends on whether people are there to help save her in childbirth or not. But it's kind of weird because it's mostly told kind of from her mother's perspective and kind of like her mother's thoughts about everything that's going on, and her mother is just focused on like raising these children and kind of like thoughts about other characters that are going around. So it's very kind of mundane and focused on like maybe a little bit of surrounding historical events, but I guess it's mostly the life within this household. And as I said, like I'm 50 pages in and she still hasn't got past 4 years old, and there is actually contents at the beginning of the book, and I can see that she's probably not going to get past 10 until at least page 150. Oh, we might get a little bit, actually, 1947 in here. So also, the prologue was actually her meeting this German man, and I was very proud because my small amount of German meant I did actually understand some of the German phrases that were put in there, even though you probably don't need to, or it's probably kind of obvious anyway, but still, always proud to know a little bit of German, or always impressed with my memory for still remembering that little bit I did at school. But it seems like this German man that she meets is Hitler. And so I feel like it's going to do that kind of, it's very classic time travel sci-fi, like would you go back and kill Hitler kind of thing. Except for her, like she's born in 1910, so when was Hitler born? Oh, 1889. He's old. Anyway, it's definitely approaching that like would you kill Hitler kind of topic from a very different direction than anything I've ever read before, just because it's more historical fiction so far rather than sci-fi, just with this weird time element in there. I wouldn't say I'm particularly enjoying the writing style, but I am intrigued by the concept, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So then Northern Lights, I am actually also about 15% of the way into the audiobook. It's about a 12-hour audiobook, so it's not too long. So far, really, we've just been introduced to this young girl, Lyra, who's been raised at Oxford University around all the scholars. There's definitely a magical element. We've met her uncle, who seems to be involved with some magical phenomenon, investigating that up at the North Pole. Someone tried to poison her uncle, so there's some corruption and nasty politics going on that she's very peripheral to, though. So to be honest, I don't really like Lyra. I think she's trying to be written as like a mischievous scamp and you're meant to like all the hijinks she's getting up to, but really, I just think she's a little shit and she's really pissing me off. Maybe I'm just too old for this book series, I don't know. But I don't really like Lyra so far. I hope she's going to grow up at some point. I guess that's the point of the book. So far it mostly has been just her hijinks at this university as she's being raised, but given quite a lot of freedom, really. But it does seem like I've just gotten up to a part where she's going to go out into the world, and so hopefully we'll learn a lot more about what's going on in the world, because that does seem like the most interesting part. I will say my favorite part of the book so far is the demons. So it seems like every person, I think every person has a demon, or they call them demons, and when they're children these demons can change shape, but then once they're adults they kind of like stabilize into a single shape, normally an animal of some kind, and they seem really interesting. I'm excited to learn more about them. I would like to say that I would start A Memory of Light this week as well, but we will see, because I just don't know if that's realistic. But I also don't know if it's realistic for me to think that I'm going to read a 42-hour audiobook next week. So it would be good if I could start it early. It really just depends on how well the weather behaves whether I can go for some runs and do some housework stuff. A lot of the housework I need to do is outside, so it's still dependent on the weather behaving. And it is meant to be sunnier this week, but I'm looking outside right now and I'm not sure I believe it. So we will see. Hello. So, reading update. Last night I did pick this up before bed, and to be honest, I'm really struggling with this. I didn't even make it to page 100, which was my goal, like 50 pages a night. I thought it should be doable, but this just reads really slow because mostly what's happening is nothing that I care about. It's just like historical family life with like some vague war stuff going on around the periphery. And yes, there is this young girl who is living her life over and over again and just keeps dying in dumb ways. And then you'll get the scene again, except this time she won't die. And there'll be maybe some few minor things changed. But like, for the most part, it's really dull. I have committed, though, to getting to page 150, maybe page 200. That's about halfway. And at that point, we should be getting some of her as an adult. And if it's not interesting by then I think we'll bail. But I'm going to try and get at least another 100 pages in, I guess. The other thing I have been doing is listening to the audiobook of Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. So I'm about 33% of the way through. Actually, it just confused me because I got to the end of part 1 and it did like a full credits kind of thing. And the whole thing where it's like, I hope you enjoyed listening to this audiobook. And I was confused. I was like, did I get the right thing? But it seems like it's just divided into parts. So end of part 1 and then it went into part 2. So far in part 1, and part 2 started with kind of like a summary of part 1. I'm a little bit confused, but anyway, I don't know if that's in the actual like physical book, but anyway, so far basically what's happened is a bunch of children have started going missing and Lyra has managed to end up going along on the journey with the people who are going to try and save these kids because she has this golden compass. So I think in America the book is actually called The Golden Compass. And is the movie called The Golden Compass? I think so. Anyway, she has this golden compass which allows you to like know things. Like you can ask it questions and then it will give you the answers, but the way you do it is a little bit strange with like setting these pictures and like fixing the question in your mind. Lyra has though managed to learn to use it somewhat, and so that's kind of made her useful in this quest to find the children. To be honest, I'm still not really liking Lyra. I still think she gets up to too much trouble and is just kind of annoying. But maybe she's slightly more likable as she learns a little bit more. Maybe. To be honest, she mostly just seems very spoiled and like, what's the word for when you like take for granted that you're going to get lots of stuff? Entitled. That's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, not liking her so far, but tomorrow I'll go for a run, so I should get through a decent chunk of it, and then hopefully I'll like her by the end of that. That's the goal for that book. I do think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the world and with the magic, but we only really get it like from Lyra's point of view, and she's very uninterested in a lot of stuff that goes on, even though in some ways she seems curious, and in other ways it's like just everything goes over her head. But as I said, I should get through a decent chunk of that tomorrow. I'm also tomorrow going to dye my hair and try and deal with the fact that my hair is currently about 6 different colours, including these terrible roots that I've actually covered up somewhat. So we will see how that goes, and hopefully I'll have different coloured hair next time I talk to you.
Pick it up from the top, hit restart. So far it's been so hard to live, but lately something in me changed. Let it go, let it be. Don't fight your way.
Hello, so I have blue hair. Very happy. Actually, I've been trying to find permanent blue hair available for a decent price, and I haven't been able to find anything like in-store or online available in New Zealand for ages. And then I went to the supermarket the morning before I'm going to dye my hair blue, and there was some there. Magic. So this is permanent blue hair dye. Mostly I did put some semi-permanent over the top because I didn't have enough. But hopefully this will last a little while. I'm quite happy with it. But anyway, let me give you a reading update. I am up to part 3, so I got to the end of part 2 in Northern Lights. And do I like Lyra? No, I still don't like her. And I'm a little bit confused because I thought she was quite young. Like, she voiced very young in the audiobook, so I thought maybe like 8ish, to be honest, like under 10. And then, and she says that she's always been told she looks young for her age, so she lies and says she's 11. And I thought, wow, if you are older than 11, you are even more unlikable, because I can forgive some of that like mischievous, shitty behavior from a really young kid who just really doesn't know better. But if you're a teenager or close to being a teenager, wow, that's terrible. Also, my nails are blue at the moment from my hair. Anyway, I think my dislike of Lyra is really hampering my enjoyment of the book. Like, it's okay, but I just get sick of Lyra always thinking she's better than everyone else and then actually being better than everyone else. Like, she's always like, all these adults are so stupid, even though she knows nothing, but then somehow everything works out for her. We did get to meet the polar bears, so I think the American cover of the Golden Compass has the polar bear, and it's used quite a lot in the advertising for the movies, I think. So we did get to meet the polar bear, and he's okay, I don't mind him. And we have gone and kind of found out more about why these children have been being kidnapped, and more about kind of the human-demon relationship. But again, I'm just constantly frustrated because Lyra's focus in the story is not where most of the interesting stuff seems to be happening. So I don't know, like, it's fine, but I really... Like, I think a lot of people like this from when they were a kid, and I really struggle to imagine a kid liking this book series particularly, to be honest. Anyway, and then the other thing I have been reading is Life After Life. I think last night I managed to get up to 172. I was trying for 200, but I got way too tired. And honestly, nothing is happening. It's so mundane. There was a little bit, I think about 120 pages in, where she kind of got stuck on this one thing where she kept dying in the same way or a similar way. And so we got that scene or that part kind of repetitively as like things happen in a slightly different way, and she actually vaguely starts remembering the previous times and does act in a certain way to not die in that way again, to the point where now her parents notice and they talk about her having had this deja vu type experience when she was younger, and she goes to see a psychologist, which I did feel like was the author just wanting to have the psychologist say a bunch of stuff about the theories they might have about why she's experiencing things like this. But then it did jump forward to her being like 18. Oh, she's only 13 actually. We did get a scene when it's older. It was like 1947, and it seemed like they were still kind of in a war type situation, or at least like a recession situation where no one has anything, which 1947, I'm not sure if that quite lines up. So I'm wondering if things have changed, but I wouldn't have thought they would have at that point. So maybe there just wasn't a lot of anything in 1947. I'm not an expert in history, and I don't really need to know the details. I will say there were some funny parts as well, when it was talking about like the influenza pandemic, and one character was like, don't go into the city, you'll get influenza, and everyone else was like, I wouldn't worry about that. And then it was a worry. It's interesting because this book was written in 2013, so before any of COVID stuff happened, but there are some bits that I feel like are particularly funny or just like can be seen in a different light after the COVID experience. So there's moments in this which are interesting and kind of entertaining, but then so much of the rest of it is just really mundane, everyday life, and just like all these mentions of random characters that I don't think I care about. But I didn't make it to 200. I said I was going to get to page 200 before I quit, so maybe today I'll get that far and then we'll decide whether we continue or not. I did actually, because I couldn't stand picking that up, I did pick up this graphic novel. To be honest, my iPad was complaining that I wasn't using it enough, because I was using it briefly for editing. Like for a while my laptop died and I had to use my iPad for editing videos. And then I've still been doing a little bit on my iPad, but now I'm doing it all on my laptop because I finally worked out my process properly. And so my iPad was feeling a bit left out, and it said, why don't you put a bunch of graphic novels on me from the library? So I did, and I got this one, Unfamiliar, which I happen to know my sister was gifted by her friend a little while ago. She'd said it was really good, and it is really adorable. We basically have this witch. She's not a very good witch, and she moves to this new town, and the house that she's bought is haunted, so she can't deal with that. She goes into town to try and find someone to help her, and finds kind of these other witches that are also not very good at being witches, and it's just really cute, and I'm really enjoying it. I haven't quite finished it, but I am really loving it. And I did also download like a bunch of other graphic novel things that looked interesting. Maybe not too many. I didn't want to go too crazy, but I'll try and read those somewhere along the way. Sometimes it's nice to just have some pictures to scroll through that it's nice and easy, you know? You know. Hello. So somehow it is Sunday. I'm not quite sure how the week has gone so quickly, but it's Sunday. So I think I'm going to wrap this vlog up because firstly, I did finish off Northern Lights. To be honest, I don't know that I really liked it. I do already have a hold on the next audiobook, so I might continue, but I'm not really sure what would be motivating me to want to, other than just wanting to know about this series that everyone talks about, which is something I seem to get sucked into a lot. Maybe I need to get sucked into that less. But also, so the audiobook, I thought there was an hour left because there was an hour left in the audiobook, and then it turned out that hour was an interview with the author. So the ending really came as a surprise to me. I was like, this is the ending? And it did kind of set up something else that's going to happen, I guess, in the next book. So we'll see. As well, though, I started listening to the interview with the author and I had to give up quite quickly because very quickly the interviewer asking the question asked a question that was direct spoilers for the second book and third book, I assume, because it mentioned characters that aren't in the first book. And like, why would you do that? Why would you put an interview at the end of the first book that spoils the rest of the series? I was just like, what? Also, from what I did hear of the interview, Philip Pullman didn't really impress me as a person. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll read the second book because I do have a hold on it already and it's not very long, but I'm a little bit confused about why so many people like the book. And even so at the end, it kind of seemed to be saying a bunch of stuff about Christianity, and possibly I didn't disagree with everything, but also it just seemed like a nonsense way of saying all that. So yeah, generally not that impressed with it, and just like still never really liked Lyra. So that was a big key factor as to why I didn't like it, which maybe is actually similar for Life After Life. So I'm about halfway through. I got to that 200-page mark where I said I would decide if I was going to give up. And I think what I am going to do is like softy an effort. I'm going to put it down, and the book that I'm reading next week is a shorter book. So if I finish that early, maybe I'll pick this up again. I got the ebook last night because Jace was not in the mood for me to be leaving the light on all night reading. So I got the ebook on my phone. I'm sure that's just as annoying, to be honest, but whatever. So I will have that ebook on my phone for the next little while. And if I happen to be somewhere where I have nothing to read, maybe I'll pick it up. I'm just going to leave it a little while and see whether I completely forget about it or whether I keep thinking about it. What I will say about this, so the characters do feel very genuine, but it's just so deep into the details that like all you can see is details, and like the character building is in the details, but you're not really getting any details about what's going on with this living her life again thing. And like for the most part, so this is where I don't really like the main character because she doesn't really seem to ever be taking any agency in her life. Like she's just letting things happen to her. And even when she's had a shit thing happen to her in a previous life and she changes things, it's always just like, oh, and then she had a vague feeling that she needed to do something. It's not really like she specifically remembers something and so she takes specific actions to avoid it. There's a couple of times where like maybe it's talking about her having more specific memories, but mostly she's just kind of floating along into terrible situations. As well, there's kind of like awful things happening, like girls being murdered and raped and domestic abuse. And even though, again, very realistic, just not that fun to read. And I did look up some reviews and, to be honest, some plot summaries online, and it seems like the ending is just going to be really ambiguous. And I think the point of the book is that even living your life over and over again, there's so many things that you can't control. And so with that kind of theme in mind, then maybe it makes sense that she's never actively taking control, but she's not even trying, you know? I don't feel like she's even trying. So I don't know that I think this book is badly written. I think if you like historical fiction and you like details and you want to read something with just like a little bit of a fantastical touch to it, maybe you'll like this. I've seen lots of people give it good reviews, but I just feel buried by the details, and even though the characters feel real, I don't feel particularly attached to any of them. Maybe that's just me. I want to say because I haven't been connected to any characters recently. However, I did also read that graphic novel Unfamiliar, and I loved it. I love all those characters, maybe just because they're very basic characters, maybe not that well developed because it's just pictures, but I love them. I love them. And it was so cute, and I was very sad to realize that the second volume isn't out yet, but it's meant to be coming out later in the year, and I will definitely be reading that. I think as well, so tonight's Sunday, I am going to pick up the second volume of Lightfall by Tim Probert. So I think I read the first volume last week. My hold came through on the second volume. This is a really beautiful graphic novel series. I'm not going to wait till I finished it to update you because my monthly wrap-up will be up soon. But also, I already know my summary for that book is going to be that it's beautiful and that I loved it. So hopefully I'm not wrong and I don't say something different in my wrap-up. Anyway, let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this vlog, or let me know if you've been reading anything else exciting lately. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.